Hi, this is Dr. Kramer coming to you live from El Cerrito Farm, accompanied by the sound of clucking chickens. That means I better check for eggs later. My question for the day for you is this. What do you think of when you hear the name Anne Boleyn? Do you recognize her as one of the wives of Henry VIII? If you're a Broadway musical fan, then you might recognize her as the character from the musical Six. She's the one in green that sings "Sorry Not Sorry, Don't Lose Your Head." Do you like learning about works from the Renaissance or adaptations of Renaissance works or history? Take a moment to like and subscribe to this channel, or leave a comment below and let me know what you'd like me to cover next. Let's start with some history of Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was born in either 1501 or 1507, scholars disagree about this, in Norfolk, England. Her father was Sir Thomas Boleyn, who was later the Earl of Wiltshire, and her mother was Elizabeth Howard, who was the daughter of a very important person, the Earl of Surrey. Anne Boleyn was educated in the Netherlands and France, and when she was old enough, she joined the household of Queen Claude of France as a lady-in-waiting. In 1522, Anne Boleyn returned to England to be a lady-in-waiting for Henry VIII's first wife, Catherine of Aragon. From about 1526 onward, Henry VIII began to pursue Anne romantically, while he was still married to Catherine of Aragon. Anne refused to be his mistress. Today, we'd consider this to be workplace sexual harassment. Due to his lack of a male heir, Henry tries to divorce Catherine of Aragon. When the Pope refuses to grant an annulment to Henry, Henry breaks with the Catholic Church, instigating the English Reformation. He marries Anne Boleyn in early 1533 and sends Catherine of Aragon away from court. Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn's daughter Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth I, is born in September of 1533. After Anne experiences several stillbirths and miscarriages, Henry VIII begins to be suspicious of her. In 1536, Anne Boleyn is accused, tried, and convicted of treason for adultery and sentenced to death. She's beheaded on May 19, 1536, on the grounds of the Tower of London. There is an abiding mystery surrounding Anne Boleyn. It involves why she lost Henry VIII's favor and whether or not she was guilty as charged of adultery and treason. How 21st century works adapt Anne's character depends not only on how they understand her fall from the king's favor, but also what cause they see her standing in for. Let's see how Showtime's The Tudors interprets the character of Anne Boleyn. In the case of Showtime's series The Tudors, which aired from 2007 to 2010, Anne and her family represent the upward mobility of a rising class, clashing with the snobbery of an older guard. The earliest episodes of Season 1 of The Tudors depict Anne's father, Sir Thomas Boleyn, working very hard to promote Henry's interests with the French king. In Showtime's The Tudors, Anne is played by Natalie Dormer, who later played Queen Marjorie Tyrell in Game of Thrones. Anne is both the beneficiary and the victim of her father's and uncle's desire to increase the family prestige, and it is her father who deliberately puts Anne in Henry's way with the hopes that the king would make her his mistress. When Anne denies sexual favors to Henry, portrayed by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers in the series, before he can promise marriage, she is at the same time defying her father and positioning herself in a more secure place. Throughout the first 2 seasons of The Tudors, even after Anne's marriage to Henry, Anne's father alternately coaches and chastises his daughter as Henry's interest in her waxes and wanes. The Tudors blames Anne's fall from grace on Henry's newfound attraction to modest, submissive Jane Seymour. Between Anne's jealous ragings at Henry for all his infidelities and her constant nagging at him to get Princess Elizabeth a highborn husband, Anne does not do herself any favors. As to historical accuracy, the series nods at a miscarriage theory of some modern scholars like Retha Warnicki in her book The Rise and Fall of Anne Boleyn. When the doctors attending the queen after the stillbirth bring Henry the body of his stillborn son, they point out his deformities. Anne and Cromwell quarrel over his selling of a confiscated abbey lands for profit, and thus Anne makes an enemy of a man the series portrays as highly influential. Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk and the king's brother-in-law, has grown to hate Anne Boleyn after initially allying himself with her family in order to remove Cardinal Wolsey from power, and he sets Anne's doom in motion when he mentions to the king that Anne has been quite flirtatious with certain court gentlemen. Henry, looking for a reason to get out of his marriage, is all too eager to believe the charges.
Anne had certainly met with some of these men in her private rooms, but the Tudors series portrays these meetings as platonic. Feeling trapped between her father's ambitions and Henry's waning regard for her, Anne seeks comfort from her sympathetic brother George and Mark Smeaton, the court musician with whom George is having a homosexual affair.
Anne's ladies-in-waiting are shown throughout season 2, misconstruing these meetings from the beginning, and Anne's own sister-in-law has a vendetta against Anne's brother that spurs her to denounce George Boleyn as Anne's lover. The only confessions of guilt from an accused lover come from Mark Smeaton, who was tortured by Cromwell's agents, and from William Brereton, whom the series portrays as a Catholic assassin in the employ of the Spanish ambassador Chapuis, who has tried to murder Anne Boleyn on several occasions. Possessing a martyr complex, Brereton kills 2 birds with 1 stone by confession to adultery with the Queen. Sir Thomas Wyatt, who in the Tudors was Anne's lover before she met the king, agonizes that he is the only one guilty, and yet he was set free. Though she had been emotional and riddled by jealousy throughout season 2, Anne meets her death calmly, and as she dies, has a vision of herself and her brother as children, frolicking with the father whose ambition sealed his children's doom.
Adaptations of Anne Boleyn's life must grapple with certain questions. How much of a Protestant was she? How much influence did she really have over Henry? What cause is the adaptation using Anne Boleyn for? What were the reasons behind her fall from power? And was she really guilty of adultery? There are certainly other intertexts to consider here, including cultural anxieties present at the time period of production, as well as casting of characters. All of these considerations influence directors when they adapt the character of Anne Boleyn. Fandom theory also sheds some light on Anne Boleyn adaptations, as there is an active online community that discusses the show The Tudors, discussing the plot points of the show, but also making historical connections.
Anne Boleyn's song from the Broadway musical Six is called Don't Lose Your Head. This song portrays Anne Boleyn as a ditzy, social media crazed party girl and downplays her undeniable interest in the great intellectual debate of her day, the religious debates surrounding the Reformation.
At least in the Tudors, Anne is portrayed as an intellectual, a caring mother, and someone who had great influence on Henry VIII. That's all for this time. Remember again to like and subscribe and comment below if you'd like to see more videos like this from Reading the Renaissance. I'm Jennifer Kramer, PhD, over and out. And here's what they were doing during the first part of that video.